I can start us off.
Perfect.
Yeah. So, hi everyone. It's really nice to be here and meet so many Filipino scientists. It's really a pleasure. These are the types of panel discussions that I love. My name is Carla Concepcion. I'm currently an assistant professor at Columbia University. I am from Manila. I actually moved to the United States for my graduate training, and I've been here since. I'm primarily a cancer biologist working in interface between chromatin biology and lung cancer biology. And I'm also the mom of two children, ages 6 and 3, almost 6 and 3. Yeah, I think those are kind of like the key things about me that you should know in terms of like this particular panel discussion.
And you can popcorn that to anyone else you'd like to hear from next.
Dan, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Hi, I'm Diane. I was also born in Manila, but I moved to the US when I was 10. My dad was an OFW nurse in England, so I think that was kind of the initial seeds of thinking about science for a career. So my half of my family's in the Philippines, half of them have been in Sacramento in the Bay Area in the last 40 years. So we moved with that side of the family when I was 10. I went to UCLA for undergrad and kind of stumbled into thinking about a PhD and then met some mentors along the way, which I could talk about later, that showed me you could actually do medical school and a PhD, which I think at the time was a really great idea. I still think it is, but comes with a lot of different challenges, unique challenges. So I am finishing that training now. I officially finished my PhD in 2022 in Richard White's lab at Sloan Kettering, and I was studying cancer biology. And I'm going to graduate from medical school this May. So I'll be starting clinical residency training in July. And very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
You can
And then
popcorn it.
I'll popcorn it over to Christine.
Thanks, Dan. So, hi everyone. I'm Christine. I was also born and raised in the Philippines, and I went to a science high school locally where I was a scholar there, and it really made me interact with a lot of people my age from different walks of life who were really inclined with science. And I found then and there that I really leaned towards like computing and its applications, engineering and technology. So I knew that I wanted to do something regarding it. So like maybe research, maybe something creating useful products that help drive innovation, especially for communities back home. So I moved to I moved to New York for undergrad like 5 years ago, and I just graduated. So I think I'm kind of like the baby amongst the panelists here. But yeah, I'm so excited to share my experiences for anyone who's also around in the same stage as I am, and just like looking at computing and maybe like intersecting computing with all the theoretical sciences that a lot of people here are probably interested in. So yeah, nice to meet everyone. And yeah, I'm gonna popcorn to Dr. Rose.
Hi, thank you again for the invitation and nice to be back at AFSA. My name is Rose, and I have had a pretty non-traditional route where a lot of my pivot points and whatever have really been influenced by what was going on personally. So I started at Davis with the bachelor's in nutritional biochem, and then ended up really then getting my PhD in neuroscience, and then realized, academia might not be for me quite yet. And so then I am now in tech as a product manager, also a position that I did not think I was qualified for the longest time. So it's just been a very non-traditional route with lots of different fields, but the overall, I guess, glue to everything is that all of the things I'm involved in, I feel has a purpose, and I feel that I basically just want to leave the world better and happier, however way I can do that, either through my outreach work, personal life, my product management role, and yeah, and mentorship of students. And that's why I love doing these panel events, and really grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for their introductions. As you can see, we have like a variety of people on a panel who are doing very different things in science, but also it's very cool to see them all in one space. But I think something that everyone kind of had in common was like they're waiting to share, they have like a pivot point where like science was on the table suddenly, and then that kind of pivoted them towards either studying science or pursuing a path that they did not expect. So I think, can everyone kind of share like a pivotal point in your science STEM journey that has shaped your career path up until now? Because you know your career paths can change and diverge in the future, but up until this point, like what was that like moment that either for you was like an opportunity that you didn't expect you'd take, or something that you were surprised at, and then now looking back you're like, wow, if I didn't have that, I wouldn't have been where I am today? And if anyone is like ready with that, because I know it's kind of a big topic, feel free to start off. But very similar, we'll just like walk through. I think Christine's got it.
Yeah, I mean, mine isn't that deep, so I thought I would start it light. But I think I was just with the right group of people in middle school. So I remember like in when I was really young, my mom would be teaching me on the dinner table, just find like calculating areas and like areas of circles, like different shapes, and I would be crying, like full on sobbing, because I could not understand like why these formulas were, and like she was just asking to memorize it, and just use it as it is. But I think around middle school, when I moved to a science high school, I was around a lot of people who were very competitive and who were really like good and interested, passionate about maths, and like they really like solving problems on the side. And what else was I to do? Like I had no one else to like play with, or like I didn't get to like play with other people my age. So I just joined them, and I just were influenced by them. So I think it's just the environment I was in, and because it's what my friends were doing, I was kind of pushed to like, oh, maybe I could like try out for like math training programs also, and like eventually I went on to like international math contests. So I think that was like a turning point for me.
I can go next, if that's okay. Yeah, so I guess for me, it wasn't really an aha moment. I'd say, you know, sometimes people come and say, you know, I really, really want to do science and that's all I'm going to do. And I was never one of those people. I think I could have done many different things. And so I kind of took the approach where I really like science, I'm challenged by it, and I like challenging myself, which is actually like a recipe for disaster sometimes. But so I decided like, okay, I'll try this, and I applied for PhD programs. And I think the key thing really is that I had a really positive experience as a student. And I think that when you're a student, that's so important because that can really shape how you think about doing science and whether you can continue on a particular path. And I happened to be in a great lab environment, a supportive PI, and who I really felt genuinely like believed in my potential. And so that, I think that type of like belief from somebody who is clearly like a successful person in this like area, I think does a lot for like a student who is very kind of like in their formative years and can really shape your career trajectory. You know, so one thing that I always say is when you're thinking about, you know, doing research in a lab, the environment is so incredibly important because, you know, as exciting as the science may be, if the environment is not good or if your mentor is not good, then, you know, that's enough to like dissuade you from pursuing this particular path. And for me, I think the key thing is that I had a really positive experience that really propelled me to like pursue it further. And so I've always been kind of like assess every kind of career stage or assess every branch point, like, am I still happy? Is this still it for me? And I went through this constantly through every like stage. And I think that's really, really important. But that beginning stage as a student and having that type of like environment and mentor and science that was exciting to me and supportive for me as a student, I think was really key.
Yeah, I can go next. So for me, I went to UCLA, which if some people went there, it's like a big pre-med factory, essentially. And I was really turned off by the pre-med culture there. it was that in addition to my dad is a nurse. And I think because there's such a culture of so many Filipinos in nursing, there was almost an expectation that I was going to go into medicine. And because of that, I resented it. And I didn't want to go into medicine. And I stumbled into joining this lab that was very translational. The PI was a pediatrician, got an MD, but primarily did research for kids with immune deficiency. And there were a couple of MD PhD students, including his daughter, who was part of the UCLA MD PhD program, that were in that. She wasn't in the lab, but she was in a nearby lab. And he also mentored MD PhD students. And I started to talk to them and kind of just get a sense of, oh, it's so cool that you could do both, that you could be the person who's discovering treatments and you could be the person who's interfacing with the patient to give those treatments. And as I credit this PI so much for many things. So I'm actually going to credit a particular person that I don't think these people are never credited as much. It was an outreach, a scientific pipeline outreach director who somehow found me. I don't know how she found me, but she knew that I was in this lab and she sat me down. She worked in the undergrad office and she was asking me what I was thinking about. And I remember saying like, oh, I started to talk to some people who did an MD PhD path. I'm kind of thinking about it, but I don't know. I don't think I'm competitive enough. I don't think I'm good enough for that. And she was like, whoa, 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 stop. You have what it takes. You can do this. We'll help you get there and we'll give you the tools to get there. And so there was that program and a couple of other pipeline programs that I was part of. And these people, that is their job to find minoritized students and get them the resources to get into medical school, graduate school, both. And so it was because of these people that really helped me get to where I am and what really encouraged me to pursue this path.
I love all those stories. I think for me, I went to a junior college. I started out there, didn't know what I was going to do. The only thing I knew about science and medicine was becoming a nurse or a physician. That was all I knew. I had so many questions and I kept getting roadblocks of, it's not on the test. I'm like, oh. So then it's like, but so I just had all these questions. Finally, I chose a major, transfer to UC Davis, and I had a TA come up to me after class one day and was like, "Hey Rose, do you want to be my research assistant?" And I'm like, "I don't know what that means." I'm like, "What's research?" So I was very late in the game. Like I did not know anything about research, like that world, until I was a junior at UC Davis. And then I started and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. But I only had 2 years left at Davis. So then I was a lab assistant for like 3 labs because I was like, I need to learn everything. And then at the very end, because I was really interested in longevity and nutrition and, stopping cardiovascular disease in my family. But then I took a neuroscience class and I'm like, oh, crap. I need to learn about the brain too if I want to live long and whatever. And so then I went to UCLA and was a lab tech there for 3 years in a great environment. Just like what Carla said, if you're in a great environment with a great mentor, that just changes everything. It's such a huge, huge influence. And I did not know anything about like engineering, but my PI said, hey, can you make a microdrive and let's record cells in the brain and do in vivo electrophys? I'm like, sure, why not? I like drawing, let's figure it out. And so we did that. And then it was just that was just the pivotal moment. It was a lot of just, sure, let's go for it. And then just went with the flow. And now I'm in tech. But that's another question.
Thank you for all those answers. I loved all those answers, but also like the common theme was like everyone had some level of community or like person and like someone who directly told them that they could do it, they should do it. Especially when you like mentally think about like, oh, can I do it? Like we're our own like enemy and challenge in these things. Like at this point, we put our own roadblocks up. But in terms of like being our own challenge, I know like being not only like a woman in STEM, but then I'll make it a Filipino woman in STEM where you're both like not East Asian, but you're not part of certain groups and like highly represented in science. I want to know on the end of like everyone made it through STEM and now exists in these fields, but like what were some of the main challenges that you encountered specifically, either due to being Filipina in STEM or just like as a structural deficiency of STEM as a culture that you had to face head on? Because I feel like we talk about the problems, but it's always like, okay, now give me an example of a person and a story that was actually affected by this. And that's what's going to stick with me, not like the PowerPoints that tell me what the problems in STEM payment or hiring is. So if anyone has like a specific challenge or something that you face either due to identity or just like because it's a structural part of science that you don't agree with and shouldn't agree with, that you just had to butt heads with. It's also a harder prompt, so I understand.
I can try to answer this question. So when I moved to the US for graduate school, I was a kind of formed adult. I mean, I was 21, right? And I didn't grow up here, right? And so I think that transitioning from Manila to the US, I think in Manila that women, girls are brought up a certain way. And I'm sure that carries over also culturally to Filipino Americans where, you're respectful, you're polite, you're sort of soft spoken. These are kind of the traits, like, the Maria Clara traits that people love to like, compliment and things like that. And so like, I was like in this type of situation. And I think you learn very quickly that that doesn't work here in terms of asserting yourself and getting respect from everybody and kind of adapting to American culture. And I think that there are many ways that we as a society here in the US can do better in terms of addressing different cultures and cultural norms, right? Like understanding where people are coming from and understanding their communication style and understanding that being less outspoken doesn't mean you know less, right? It's just how you are and how you conduct yourself. And so I think like leaders and managers can definitely work on that. But as like a trainee and being in this type of environment, I think that it can be challenging to get that kind of like respect and level of like credibility that I think might be more natural for others who were raised in this particular type of like Western society. And so I think that can be challenging, and I still work on this even now. I think I'm like much better, but it like persists through the different career stages, and it's something that you kind of just have to be aware of when you're sitting in the room and you're kind of like scared to speak up. Like, what is holding you back? Is it that you don't know what they're talking about? Probably not. It's probably just because there's some programming inside that makes you a bit like more shy or more reserved to like speak up. So these are the types of things that I try to be more aware of. And also like now that I'm mentoring people, also trying to understand that part of themselves and trying to understand people's unique communication styles. But not everybody does that. So as like Filipinas, we kind of have to think about that, like advocate for ourselves without assuming that the person in front of us is advocating for us, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I can definitely relate with the cultural difference. I think for me, I was born in the Philippines in Paniki, which is like 3 hours north of Manila. And first person in my family go to college. And I think the biggest issue for me is taking on more than I can possibly take and having that gratitude mentality that could also be very difficult because it's like I have so many families in the Philippines who would, want what I have right now, and I cannot take this for granted and all of that. And I still have that mentality of like I cannot waste any minute. But it's just this intense pressure that I've been told that I put on myself, and it's unrealistic. And so in a lot of the places that I've been in, I'm usually the first Filipino person that people meet. And so then I also have that added pressure of trying to represent Filipinos, even though I can't possibly represent everybody, but having that pressure of I need to be as good as possible so that I don't make Filipinos look bad. So yeah, I think that has been the biggest challenge that I've had is taking on more because of that gratitude mentality, and also the pressure of trying to represent the Filipino community, even though I should not be doing that. But I just want everybody, to respect us too. Yeah.
Think one challenge that and I think what the best example for this is when I was an undergrad, we were encouraged to present posters at national conferences. So I did more of a society conference to start with. That was in my lab. So, it's like who you can imagine. It's a lot of white scientists that are part of this conference. And my pipeline program suggested go to AberCamps. This is the minority student conference. You'll meet a lot of students like you. It'll be great. So I went to AberCamps and I didn't see a single Filipino person there. And I think it just comes across, and this is this sort of theme I've seen in so many parts of my career, is just the idea of being a minority in a minority. And so I join a lot of these spaces that participate in a lot of different groups that really champion minority scientists, minorities in medicine, but often I am just of the person, the Filipino person that's representing that whole space, that whole culture. And so it's feeling that tension of how do you make space for ensuring that these voices, like Latinx voices, Black voices, Indigenous voices, are heard, but then also make space for ourselves who are also a presence in this culture, in this country, and making sure that we also have the ability to advocate for our own issues. So that's a tension that I'm always trying to learn from, and I think as I've gone through this whole path, there's still so much more to learn. So yeah, I think that's a big challenge of face that we all face.
Yeah, I think that was really wonderful, and like Dan and presented everyone in class is like really nicely. But yeah, like I resonate on deeply with the lack of representation. Um and more on the gender side, I feel like ever since I was young, like um even my uncles or my people, like older people in my family, would be like, oh, a man go into engineering because their brains are wired that way, and women, like if you want to be ambitious, you could go into like medicine or like somewhere in the pure sciences. So I was wired into thinking that, oh, like, yeah, that maybe that is the path for me. Like maybe my brain isn't wired the way I want it to be, and like this what I'm interested in is not actually what I'm talented at. So like there's that whole dilemma like all my life. But I think like also coming into undergrad and like industry now, like most of the people around me are either male or like South or East Asian. And I would be the only one in that room like looking like me. And of course that like hits a lot of spots, like especially like imposter syndrome. Like, am I supposed to be here? Like they've been conditioned, like they've been raised to like do this. So am I deserving to be here? Like, can I do exactly what they do? So yeah, just those like conflicts in your head that arise because of the lack of representation, and you don't have the network to like of people, of Filipinos who can tell you like, oh, no, that's not the case. Like I also did it, and that network isn't as big as like I would have wanted it to. So yeah, that was a conflict I was dealing with like for the most part of my formative years.
Those answers were so good. And it's always a question of like, there's clearly like layers upon layers of just existing as a Filipino in spaces that you have to like learn and unlearn and then relearn, and then also have to like interact with other people about this. So now it's like you have to do all this extra work just to exist. And then you put yourself in spaces that are already challenging to exist in, and then we have to do extra. So I think it resonates. It's like it feels like there's always this extra work on our backs. And also the thing is like we're holding up the world and all of Filipino identity whenever we enter spaces where we are the only ones. But I think that's the importance of like events like this. So showing you like you're not the only one. And when you are the only one, when you have problems, you can now reach out to other people who either had the same experiences or similar experiences. Because oftentimes it's like, well, how am I going to do this? I've never experienced this one very specific challenge. Someone you know, or now know based on this event, probably has too. I think in this case, I'm going to pivot to something actually that came up because of this question, but we talked about how, or like Christine touched upon about how like male gender with female gender, like stereotypes around science. In your experiences, like have you had a clear experience of how your diversity, so how your personal perspective as a woman in science, as a Filipina in science, has actively contributed to like cool innovation or problem solving in ways that like maybe everyone else in the room didn't see, but you did because of like all the layered experiences you have as a person? And then if you don't have like a specific instance, you can also talk about like what do you do to exist in these spaces comfortably? Like how do you have coping mechanisms or strategies to be a woman in science? So it's like a two-part question. You can either answer one or the other. So what is something that you've seen your specific situation, because you're diverse in your experiences and understanding, create something good? And if you haven't had like a specific example of that, how do you navigate these spaces comfortably and like self-soothe and naturally understand like where do I draw the line? And so that's like another ponder question because it's a mix of memory and like reflection.
I think I encountered this the most when I was a postdoc at Mass Gen Hospital, Harvard Med here in Boston, and how a lot of the people that are in labs are from someone else's lab, or they know, or it's very closed community, and they recruit within that community. And this lack of diversity really bothered me. And so what luckily I was part of postdoc associations at Harvard Med and at MGH, and they were okay with me creating this initiative where we partnered with a community college, the biggest one in Massachusetts, Montclair Community College, and we spoke with deans and directors there. And the overall goal truly was to recruit people that are outside of the Harvard MGH community, like people that need to be part of that space. And I just wasn't seeing that. And I even had PI say, Rose, this outreach work is great and all, but you know what the main focus is, and that's to publish. And I'm like, if I'm not going to do it, who will? And so that's been the struggle that I have come across. And it's as if, you know, creating diversity or increasing diversity, the key issues has been retention and recruitment. So we need to really tap into going to these populations and making them feel that you do belong. It's not that intimidating, it's not that difficult. You just need mentors, you just need these opportunities so that we can help with your resume and CV and just workshops, and you know, equip them with the tools that these other people have access to. And that has been really helpful. But yeah, so in medicine and in science, I think it really is the recruitment and retention, especially. I know a lot of people who are of diverse backgrounds who have left science and have left medicine because the environment is not conducive to their growth. They had PIs who did not know how to mentor or be good advisors to them. And it's such a shame because these are great scientists and they left academia and medicine because of the environment that they were in. So I think we just need more leaders of diverse backgrounds and experiences so that we can help with retention and recruitment and a better diverse force within science and medicine. And I really do think that a diverse scientific community brought in scientific innovation.
Yeah, I can talk about. Oh, can
Oh, go ahead, please.
okay. Yeah, so I
I'll go
can
after
talk
you.
more.
I'll go after you.
Yeah, I can talk more about the I don't know, like the positive side for me, like being a woman in STEM. And like I really do think like like though, you know, we're underrepresented and like there are lots of like glass ceilings to break. I do think like especially in industry and in a lot of areas, the female perspective is really valued. Some people like I remember like so many group projects or like research projects where I would, you know, like be suggesting an idea like during the early stages of brainstorming, like, well, maybe we could focus on this. And my team, who would literally be all male identifying, would be like, oh, yeah, we're like, they're not vibing with it. But I guess like, um, and some of them like might think like, oh, it's too personal. Like, maybe they want to focus on the science, or like even in work, like with any idea, they want the presentation to be more like technical, to focus on the specifics and the quantitatives. But there's the female perspective of you know, your emotions and like what you think and how you feel for the people around you, that really changes how you deal with things, like how you identify problems in your community. And sometimes that like being emotional, and like I I would not like deny that. Like I'm very emotional and like I'm very attached to some of the work that I do. Sometimes that being dramatic and like emotional really helps you like understand the community you're serving it. Like especially with research that pertains to like communities, especially those marginalized in the Philippines. Having that sort of compassion or like an emotional connection to them that most guys I think are not really like inclined to, really helps you understand the problem from the root and come up with a more um suitable idea that is more easily communicated to the community that it's supposed to serve.
Yeah, I guess I was going to share something similar to what Rose had mentioned, which is retention. And, you know, I think that our particular identity as a Filipino and as a female can really help other people stay in science and contribute to the work that we do that eventually has a positive impact to society. So I don't know what it was like when you were a student, Dan, in Sloan, but when I was a student, there was not a single female in my floor who had a kid. Okay. Like it was very, I feel like we were kind of frozen in time where everybody was the same age and we would go out on the weekend and like we would work really hard, and it was a very kind of certain type, right? And then I moved to Boston for my postdoc, and then my husband and I were ready to have a child, so we decided to have a baby, and I was at MIT at the time. And then when I found out I was pregnant, I was like terrified because I actually had never like seen it really, like how to do like a postdoc and have like a kid at the same time. It was like freaking me out because how do I do this? I had never seen it. And you know, fortunately it was in a very supportive lab environment. My PI was amazing, and he's actually the one who told me like, you can do it, I've seen it happen many times. And he was extremely supportive. Can you imagine? Like my white male PI was the one telling me it's gonna be fine, don't even worry about it. But my point is, I think then like being that person in lab. So my lab in Boston was a big lab. You know, there were many postdocs, many graduate students, and there were many technicians who were fresh out of college and trying to figure out what they wanted to do with their lives. And I think it was really helpful for them actually to see me and other female postdocs in my lab who eventually had babies do that like juggling act of having a family and pursuing a career in science in a very intense research environment. And, you know, we kind of served as like intermediate like mentors between like the PI and the technicians because the lab was so huge. And so you know, we would have discussions about how to balance kind of this career path with having a family and other things that they wanted in their lives. And I think seeing that helped, right? For people who want to have families or, you know, pursue other things in their lives, and they're not like solitary scientists. I think there are some scientists who that's all they do, and there's some scientists who do many things. And so if they wanted to do many things, or have a life outside of the lab, I think it was helpful for them to see that type and retain them in this career path. And at the same time, we also had a lot of undergraduate summer students who were coming from underrepresented backgrounds. I think that with, you know, the identity of being Filipino, being female, really helped me understand them more and where they're coming from, because I didn't have this assumption that everybody came from like a pedigree, because I came from halfway across the world and, stepped into this environment, and I had made that transition like years before. And so you don't forget that, right? And so I think that helps connect with these like young scientists who are trying to retain in science and keep them there, understand what their challenges are, including transitioning from kind of let's say like a community college to 4-year a competitive environment like MIT, for example. So that was really, I think, instrumental in that kind of in those types of connections.
My lab, everyone joked there's something in the water because there was a child born from someone in the lab every single year that I was there. So things have changed
That's
a little
great.
bit for the better at Sloan. So in terms of, I guess I'll approach this question more in the medicine side of things. And I was recently on the interview trail, and I applied for dermatology residency, particularly in research track residency. And a lot of the questions that I got in the trail is, if you could build your ideal clinic, what would that patient panel look like? And dermatology has definitely been rooted, and a lot of everything that we've learned in the field of clinical dermatology is on white skin. And now there's this increasing movement in understanding skin of color. But a lot of those conversations have really focused on darker skin tones, so African American or Black skin tones. And I think just being Filipino, being a woman, you're almost, when you make it this far, you're so much braver than you give yourself credit for. And so my idea that I pitched to them, and at the time I was thinking like, I don't know, maybe it's too niche, but I kind of just went for it. And I said like, my ideal clinic is a Southeast Asian clinic where I can work with Filipinos or Southeast Asian patients, and that I can focus on their skin diseases. And that was actually received so positively because no one had ever pitched that idea. And especially thinking of that as a population to perform research on, there's so many unanswered questions. And so I think in many spaces, we think of being the minoritized population as a disadvantage, but I think in a different space, you can really pitch that and leverage that to focus on the people that we care about. And I think times have changed in medicine and science, not as much as it could, but there's an opening there now to being accepting of focusing on our population for research and for medicine.
I just saw Rose's comment of when you sign up for this clinic. That sounds amazing. But I think it's great to see how, again, you can leverage that same like minoritized identity to make yourself special in these spaces, but also like use that momentum to carry through like big ideas or projects that could potentially change how people view Filipinos in these spaces. So it's nice to see like a crack is forming and that like everyone in this space is kind of like understanding that like this is a moment in time that we can challenge these kinds of social stereotypes. And it's cool to see the generational shift as we interact with different levels of science. But I think I'm just gonna close off the formal panel questions because we do have a few like audience questions I don't want to miss out on too much. But we're gonna do the stereotypical like what advice do you have question as an ending for the formal panel, and then we can get into some of the more specific ones that the audience has for each of you actually. So I think this is a very like, what advice would you give kind of question to anyone who is pursuing your specific field, a specific field in science, or just like combating the ideas of like, do I or don't I go into science? Because I feel like that was like my biggest issue of like, man, I could do a ton of different things. Is science really the way to go for this one? But like, how would you answer these questions, and what advice would you give to young Filipino women in these positions? And then anyone can go.
I can start off. I think this is fresh in my mind because I was just in the Philippines a few weeks ago and I was visiting my family. My family's actually from Moncada, so very close to Manakit. And it was just so nice being there. And what I tell people is like, I'm very self-aware when I'm in the US of being the person that sticks out. And when I'm in the Philippines, it's like it's the absence of that feeling and remembering what that feeling is. And just what the big advice that I would say, having seen my family and like catching up with them, is just remembering that you have such a large village of people who are rooting for you, who are here to support you. And in addition to my family, I've had an incredible life partner. My husband has been a major, major piece of support system for me. And there are just all these friends that I've made along the way. And so you build your community as you go through these spaces, and they might be Filipino, they may not be Filipino, they might be women, they may not be women. And I think you find the people that you can lean on for all of these hard times. I think the most dangerous part of this path is feeling like you're alone. And the truth is that you're not. There's so many people there, but you can feel like that in the really hard times. So just remembering who are the people who are backing you, who will always be there for you, that is what keeps me going. And that's what I hope will keep all of you going as well.
I can try to say something. It's probably not a very well-formed thought. I think my advice for people thinking about this career path or are in the middle of this career path is to take your temperature once in a while and try to know yourself really well. And when I say like take your temperature once in a while, what it means is I think that it's really easy to fall into these commitments and understand and go for this path because it's what you think you're supposed to do. But I would say that that's probably not true. I mean, you could probably be successful in different things. And so it's this constant reassessment of what you want, who you are, what are the things that are important to you in each stage that I would encourage you to do. And that there's no be all end all, right? Meaning like if people sometimes ask me like academia and industry, this is like a common like question, am I like it's whatever you want it to be, right? It's what's right for you. It's not on anybody else. It's your life. And so you live your life the way you want to live your life. And then the second of knowing yourself is understanding what are the things that you need to be successful. And that might look different from each person in different career stages. And so having that like self-awareness when you make these decision points about where to go is going to be really, really important. What do I need right now with who I am right now, with the skill set that I have right now? What are the things that I need to work on? What are my strengths? And how can I leverage that for this career path? What are who are the community members that I need to advocate for myself to support me or to get me through this? That could look like, I think I would also emphasize, like, I think having like a really supportive partner and a really supportive mentor are the two things that are super duper key to get you through far, I think. And so when you lose one of those, if your partner happens to be not supportive of you having a career or having an intense career path, that's already like, that's already a huge barrier to like kind of overcome. And the same thing with, you and your mentor not being aligned in terms of like values and priorities. That's going to be a really, really hard challenge to overcome. Not to say that you can't overcome it, but it's going to be more difficult. So when you're making these choices, have that in mind. And yeah.
Yeah, I definitely echo what has been said in terms of community and also just your support system. I would just say go for it. If you're scared, if you feel uneasy, if you feel nervous, if you feel the imposter syndrome, sure, reflect in terms of what is making you feel those. But at the end of the day, if you feel that this is what's right for you, despite what others say or hurdles, I would say just go for it. And then if it doesn't work out, check that temperature, like Carla said, and pivot if you need to. I was in grad school and I had to change labs during my fourth year, and it was the best decision that I ever did. And then I was in a great lab environment, great mentor. I restarted my dissertation and finished in 2.5 years. But that was because I had a great mentor. We had a great working relationship, and we just like went for it. So I think that is my, for one thing, is to just go for it. Second thing is to not be blinded by shiny objects. Lab, PI, institute, or even the title. I hear a lot of answers of like, oh, I want to be called doctor. I'm like, okay, but what else? Why do you want to pursue this? And that ties into the third concept of pursue science and medicine, STEM with the double M, guided by right intention and purpose. And I think that having the right intention and purpose will really influence how you perceive tough times, and will also influence your attitude during those tough times. Because STEM, there's a lot of tough times. It's not going to be smooth sailing, but having that purpose will drive you. It will remind you that this is temporary and I can handle it, and I will get to where I want to go. And this is just a stepping stone. And I guess lastly is to not forget your community, and to not absorb this elitist way of thinking that I have seen in academia, and that you are not better than those who are not scientists or physicians. You're just in different paths, and to continue to treat people with respect and dignity, and yeah, to just leave the world better and happier. Empathy.
Yeah, I can get lost, but yeah, deeply resonating with all of that. I think it's wonderful that we're having this. Yeah, I think something I want to say is that for me, what really worked is just also like being genuine and true to myself. So like, when I know that I can do something and like I know something, I would like I would before I would just shake myself down or like curl myself up and like just say like, oh, I don't know, like. But when I don't know things, I think there's also merit in intellectual humility, just like saying, oh, this is what I don't know, and this is what I'm gonna do to like learn about it. So I think like those things, like just learning about yourself and staying true to what you think, it will take you a really long way. And as what's been said, like it's also true that whatever path you decide to take, you could like dream for the most ambitious things, you can dream for like the titles and like the shiny things and everything, but if that's not like who you are as a person, and like that's not what you're passionate about, then it will show in your work, and it will, and other people around you will know. So yeah, just those things. And yeah, I'm really excited to see where all the people here in this room will be in 10 years, and how we're going to give back to the country.
I love all the advice and the echoing all of the sentiments. Before we hop into our Q&A with the audience questions, I do want to take a photo because I know if I wait till the end, people will leave early. So I'm going to monopolize in the fact that we have a lot of people here. And if you're comfortable taking a photo today, you can just undo your camera. And then this is our quick break before we hop into the audience questions. Gonna give everyone a minute if they want to turn on cameras. Raphael's camera broke, so he will not be joining us. Okay. I think this is the maximum amount of cameras. I'm just gonna take a full screen photo. So 1, 2, 3. Yeah, got it. Okay. We're gonna just pivot to the audience questions, which I think some of them have people specifically for them, and some of them are just to all the panelists. So I'm gonna start off with one that Andrea actually submitted to the quiz, like the little RSVP form, so gets priority. But how do you combat the ever-changing nature of technology in your fields and remain on top of those changes? I think if anyone works in like a field that has a lot of tech, that's a good question for you, but didn't have a specific person in mind. But this is very true. Science and tech moves very quickly. So how do you keep on top of that? If you do, and what are your tactics?
Yeah, so I can speak for massive part on that. I think, especially in a lot of tech companies, the technologies, like you change platforms like almost every 2 months or every other month. So um, I thought like, oh, I just need a job, then I'm gonna take a break from like learning and like studying for a bit. Like I'm kind of tired. But then when I got there, like my manager was like, oh, attend this guild meeting, or like you have to attend this workshop whatsoever. So I was like, oh my God, like it doesn't end. So yeah, I think just having, that growth mindset and just like learning and like taking opportunities to like join like workshops, hackathons, like this is a great start already, like being in a woman in STEM panel, it's already like, increasing your domain knowledge in whatever field you're planning to go in. So I think just having that learning mindset and like unlike me before, just like thinking of learning not as a task, but as something that, oh, I'm excited about. And like even though there will be tough times, like, oh, this is something like I can do even as a hobby because I genuinely enjoy and I actually grow from learning. So yeah, I think that's what a lot of my mentors have been advising me to like frame things like that.
Yeah, I can try to answer this too. So I am a product manager right now for Evident. It was formerly known as Olympus Scientific Solutions. And I now have been able to disassemble, assemble a microscope, all of that. And I'm like, I did not know any of this when I was a grad student and as a postdoc. And there are just so many things I wish I knew as a grad student. And I don't think I even used my microscope to its full potential. It was insane. Like I see photos now, I'm like, I can take that? What? And so I think it really is a matter of trying to learn the tools as much as possible and really using it to its full potential. I would highly recommend just reaching out to even the companies that build these machines, these instruments, and ask, hey, do you have tutorials that you can provide to customers, potential customers? And so I think there is I think there's a potential that we don't use our instruments to their full potential. At least I didn't. I wish I knew. I would have taken better and published better photos. But yeah, I think that industry, tech, and science and medicine can work a bit better. And the responsibility that I have as a product manager is really knowing what customers need. Because I think that tech should really be guided, or at least the advancement of tech should be guided by what is needed by the customers. And so, we are working on a launch and there's like, I have all these questions. I'm like, how will this actually help researchers? I have 14 years of being a researcher. How will this address the two key problems that researchers face? And they're like, oh, we'll have to think about that. And so it's like, I guess rocking the boat in a way. And my direct manager actually said, yeah, we have like people rocking the boat now and what addressing challenging status quo. But it is that it's like use your background and your experiences to really advocate for what you need. And if you need better tech, let the companies know, hey, this isn't working for me, because we don't know what to change if we don't know what the problem is. And so if you really do have a microscope, say, and it's not working out for you, tell your rep that it's not working out. Like they have to know what's the problem for them to fix it, basically.
Honestly, yeah, on the biomed engineering side, you'd be surprised at how many people do not tell you when things are broken and or they've been using it the same broken way the entire time. And then suddenly you're like, oh, I can fix that. And they're like, wow, it didn't have to be this hard. So I feel like in science, sometimes we're conditioned to do things one way and one way only. But similar to what Christine said, you just have to have a very open mindset to either like pulling things apart and like asking questions about it and also just learning. And I think that's the lifelong learner thing that they preach about in medicine all the time, but I find it's valuable in all spaces.
Can I add something really quick what Christine said? There is beauty in saying I don't know also in tech, and then team effort of then figuring it out together. Don't be afraid to say I don't know.
I use that all the time in medicine. I just constantly tell people I do not know things. Even if I kind of know it, I don't claim to know things, because then someone will teach me something new. So it's not worth it in terms of like acting like you know things when you don't. It's not going to help you. And oftentimes people want to help you, so monopolize on that. JM Ocampo also asked a question: what are your favorite strength and tool that you carry as a Philippine person in the sciences? And I feel like this doesn't have to be like a literal tool, but if there's something that comes to mind of any of the panelists. This is also my reminder to the audience: if you have a question that you are burning to ask, feel free to also raise your hand and or drop it in the chat.
I would say the fact that I can speak Tagalog is like you just form instant connections so quickly in the hospital or in research spaces. Just being Filipino and finding another Filipino person, you're like, oh my God. And so I don't know how many other people really have that level of shared community. And it's funny because I wrote about this literally in my personal statement for residency, but kapwa is so fundamental to who Filipinos are, and just that there's no direct English translation for it, but it's really just that like feeling that communal relationship and how we are part of each other's lives. And I think that makes it feel like you're part of something larger, which is so special.
I think as Filipinos, we're also very, we have this very mixed culture, which allows us to relate to many different types of culture. And so that's something that I think is unique about us, because, we share many similarities to Hispanic cultures, but also we come from the same regional areas like other Asians. And then, with kind of American influence, it's also easier for us to kind of relate, I think, to Western cultures a little bit more than kind of our other Asian counterparts. So I think that's a strength that helps us relate to more different types of people more seamlessly than others, I think.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to the kapwa aspect and community, and I try to build that in like whatever work environment that I'm in, and that we're in it together, we're a team. And I think that really does stem from being raised Filipino and doing it as a team, that even though I've finished my job here at this conference, my teammate is still working on theirs, let me go help them. It's that we're in it together, we're a team. And I think that is beautiful, and it increases empathy and morale within the group.
Yeah, another Filipino value I also want to bring up is pakikisama. So I know like a lot of us have worked with people, that are not really easy to work with. And it's easy for a lot of other cultures to just shrug that off and be as blunt as possible and let that affect their work. But I feel like Filipinos and other East Asians, other Southeast Asians in general, have that value that, allows them to like deal with people from different walks of life and just like understand and deal with different attitudes. So I think that's really a behavioral like plus in both like research, academia, industry.
I like how that question pivoted straight into like value systems and the things that become like core Filipino things. That was like an accidental theme, but I really enjoyed that. And it's also interesting because then it's like being Filipino inherently makes you a little bit different, but in a great way. Charlotte has a long question, but I think some people actually are well equipped to answer this on the panel, which is why I'm just going to read it out loud. But Charlotte says they're in their first year of their PhD studies, and they agree that environment significantly influences our scientific endeavors. However, they're curious about situations where one might find the mentorship style and research environment incompatible with their learning, especially in the middle of a semester. In such instances, is opting to switch labs and PIs advisable, or could potentially harm your PhD career? So early PhD struggle of not vibing with the lab or a PI, how do you pivot, and is it advice? So I think that's the summary of that one. For those with the PhD experiences. I don't know who wants to go.
I left. I think it's totally fine, especially for undergrad. I think the mentorship is the key, kind of like Carla said, is that having a really positive environment and mentorship will really enhance your experience. And it would help you get into a PhD because you'll get that really strong ladder of rec. I applied for a PhD in neuroscience, did not really have a PhD or a background in neuroscience. My bachelor's was in nutritional biochemistry, but it was my letters of rec that really got me into that PhD program. And I think that it's really important. Undergrad is a time when you can just explore what you want and work hard and build those relationships with PIs. But if it's not working out, it's not worth your time, your health, and your mental health.
Just as a note, Rose, they're a first year PhD student.
Oh, they are first. Oh, yeah, move. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're advised. just leave.
So yeah, I was a fourth year PhD student and I moved. It was the best decision of my life. It
Yeah,
was
I think
also
in
very
that
hard.
case,
I can understand.
I think in that case also, it's both ways, right? Because the PI probably also doesn't want to spend more time with somebody who, like, it's not productive on either end. It's not just like from your end. It's all about the fit, right? So it's a two-way thing. And calling that out earlier is definitely than calling it out later, or like stretching it out when you're just wasting, everybody's wasting each other's time essentially. That being said, I wouldn't recommend hopping around, like 5 times or anything like that. So you also have to like do your work, which means trying to get as much information about the lab before rotating, talking to past students, past recent students, and trying to understand. You can't always predict until you're in it, of course, because like the stress points are there and it's very different when you're actually like in the lab. But as much as you can, try to get as much information earlier so that you can make informed decisions as you kind of like switch labs or explore the next lab option.
I would say trust your gut. So if you feel this now when it's so early, it's only going to get amplified down the road when you have a project that hasn't been working for 3 years and you're trying to write a paper and your reviewers are asking for 2 years worth of experiments. So I think, these relationships have to really be built on solid ground while it's not rocky yet. And so if you're feeling that it's unstable now, I don't think that it'll change significantly. Or I would be surprised if it changed significantly in the future. And so if you need to leave, then change labs. And people have done it. And I don't know a single person, and I've known many people who've changed labs in many phases of their PhD. No one has ever regretted it. So take that for what it's worth.
Yeah, kind of to add to what Dan said, because I actually had this conversation with a first year PhD student recently. I told her rotations are like dating. Okay, this is like the easiest part of the relationship. If it's not like easy now, then like get out because real life is gonna come at you and it's gonna come at you hard. And so, advice on dating, advice on rotations, whatever. Take it as you like. Take what you like. But yeah, definitely agree with.
And I do think
Can
that
I add? Oh, sorry. Can I add to what Carla said too? I thought that was beautifully said. It is a two-way street to communication. And sometimes it's also worth having those difficult conversations if it's possible. You also have to gauge, the temperature. But yeah, I think like having difficult conversations and voicing what your style is, or making sure kind of like dating too, what's their love language or the mentor mentee language and compatibility. So I think if they are a decent advisor, then perhaps they're open to adjusting how they mentor you.
I was gonna say I hope that answered Charlotte's question, but I'm sure it did because it was a resounding yes to switching if you need to, and earlier the better. But it was great advice. I don't know if anyone else has any specific questions from the audience that they want to drop in. If not, this is the final 10 minutes, so I'm going to do closing remarks and also some things about future events and things to keep connected. While I do that, everyone can also feel free to, if you had something that you learned today from any of the panelists, drop it in the chat. I always like seeing people's like real-time learning points because then they remember the weirdest things and like people quote exact things. So if you learned something new today, anything at all, or whatever stuck with you, drop it in the chat while I struggle to screen share. Okay, I think this is screen share. On AFSA's end, I'm just going to go through one future event that's our main thing coming up after this. Just as a closing for AFSA, we have a PSR, which is a Philippine Society and Revolution educational course. We needed your input on planning days for it. It's a multi-day course. It's going to mainly be based in New York City for anyone who's here. We'll also be highlighting how this affects contemporary Philippine science. This will be led through our advocacy division. So like this panel is head through education, we have advocacy, we have all different parts of our committees. So if you're interested in this or would like to, or know someone that would be interested in the area, feel free to send them this information or our link tree, which is in the QR code. Again, dates are not solidified. It's just more about figuring out who's free when they are free. It's also on our Instagram, which I manage. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop that. And if you're interested in keeping in touch with either of the organizations, so Association of Filipino Scientists on our left and CFAM on our right, these are the respective links. So you can scan this for our AFSA link tree, which has all of the different forms, including the one for any kind of either membership globally or membership locally. So local membership means New York area, because sometimes we host in-person events. So we like having a nice little spreadsheet of people who we can just ask questions for that. And then on the CFAM end, this is our join link. So it's linked directly to the CFAM website if you want to stay looped in about future events. Next year, CFAM 2025. So our national conference is ideally going to be in New York City. So if you're based on the East Coast, we potentially may have like a really big Filipino medical conference at that time next year, which is usually early in the year. But this is your two ways of keeping in touch. If anyone wants to screenshot QR code real time, I'm going to leave it for a little bit because I feel like people close these things and I'm like, man, I didn't even get to screenshot that. And then I'm just going to scroll the chat to see what's going. A lot of people learned a lot of cool things and have been deeply inspired based on the chat. And then I have one very long question. Rafi says there's a question. I'm not sure if that's real.
Okay, no, it's an actual question. Wait, is there still time for a question? Sorry.
We're in the
okay.
We've officially closed.
Okay, so from Fatima, she wants to ask if it's helpful for residency app. So she's going to be an MD student next year, and she's in a lab right now. She's asking if it's helpful for residency apps to stay in the same lab as undergrad through med school.
I would say it depends. If there's a continuity of a project and if that project is going to be something that can lead to a publication or a presentation, then I think that would be definitely worth it. But also med school is just such an exploratory time. So totally fine to explore new interests. I came into med school thinking I was going to be a pediatric oncologist and I'm going to be an adult dermatologist. So very, very different. Yeah, I think it just really depends on that relationship and be open to change if those opportunities present themselves.
I don't know if anyone has anything else to say about that. If not, we can close a bit early, so long as no one has any last minute questions. it's cool to see people also in the comments being inspired directly by this panel to do things like pivot in science careers or pivot towards science careers. So clearly there's already value that comes out of spaces like this and having spaces that talk about these things openly. And Diane did share their contact information chat. So if you feel free to share your contact info in the chat if you want to stay connected with any of the panelists, and that goes for panelists and or people. Because I did see some people drop their emails. And if you don't catch it here, any panelists who are comfortable sharing like a work email, we'll also probably send it in a recap with the link to the recording for anyone who either made it late or couldn't make it today. But otherwise, I will give everyone an extra 5 minutes back to their life on this Wednesday evening. Thank you for joining us midweek, and thank you from AFSA, and also thank you from CFAM.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yes.
panelists.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
everyone.